Greetings, it is I, Tantus Naravan Dracovin, Lord and Emperor of the Dracovin Empire, and welcome. It is time to continue my discussion on the Pathfinder role-playing game system. We're talking about the environmental hazards you can face. We got the last 3 free today. Let's talk suffocation. You can reach an area where you can suffocate. You need to hold your breath. Because you need air to survive. You really do. Without air, you die. So, you can hold your breath for an amount of time equal to twice your Constitution score. That's the number of rounds that you can go and hold your breath. If you make any kind of standard action or full round action during the time period you're holding your breath, each time you do that, you subtract 1 from the total amount of rounds that you would have had to hold your breath. So, maybe I want to make standard action or full round actions the entire time that I'm trying to hold my breath. Guess what? I'm halving my time. Yeah, subtracting 1 round each time. Now, after it's up that period of time, I have to start making Constitution checks, starting with DC 10, but increasing by 1 for each previous check. So, 11 for the second check, 12 for the third check, so on and so forth. As soon as I fail my first check, I go unconscious. My hit points become 0. Second round after I failed my check, my hit points become -1 and I start dying. Third round after it, I suffocate. I die. So you don't have a lot of time once you start failing your checks when suffocating. Now there's such a thing as slow suffocation. Slow suffocation assumes that I will start suffocating after 6 hours in a sealed up 10 by 10 by 10 box of area. However this happened, however you're in this area, you have 6 hours to live. After that period of time, I take 1d6 points of non-lethal damage. Every 15 minutes, I am still within this cube. Now, this is not to say that if there's more than one medium creature, that takes up some of the time you would have before you'd start making checks. So does a fire, like a fireplace or something, or like a campfire. That would also take up the equivalent amount of a medium creature. Basically, if you have 2 people, you're halving the amount of time you'd have to start before you start suffocating. Now, should you go unconscious from your suffocation damage of non-lethal, you start taking lethal damage. Same rate of every 15 minutes until you die. Now, it's also important to note that a small creature takes up half of the air of a medium creature. So it might be 12 hours if a small creature was in this 10 by 10 by 10 box. Water can be dangerous too. The fact is, if I'm walking through water that doesn't go over my head, I need not make any checks. I can just move through it. And this is assuming it's a calm water that we're walking through. Now, if I, for whatever reason, have to swim, it's going to be a DC 10 swim check in this calm water, or a DC 10 strength check if you don't have swim. If I have armor or equipment, it will weigh me down and make it harder to swim. You can look at the swim skill to get all the details on that. Now, if the water happens to be fast-moving, well, now I have to make a swim check DC 15. If I fail this check at any time, I'm sort of being swept along, and I start taking damage. I take 3 points of non-lethal damage. Each round, I'm being swept away. Unless it's a really rocky, or it has a lot of, like, cascades you'd be falling around, then it becomes a d6 lethal per round, because I'm getting bashed into rocks and such. Deep water. Deep water has its own hazards. First off, you're probably not going to be able to see. There's no light if it's deep enough. So that's a hazard in of itself. But let's talk pressure. Now, you're going to take 1d6 points of damage per minute per 100 feet you are below the surface. So at 300 feet, it'd be 3d6. Now, you can make a fortitude save to avoid this damage, starting at DC 15, plus 1 per every previous round that you've made this check. It just makes sure you don't take that damage for that minute. Cold water can be its own hazard too. Cold water will do 1d6 points of non-lethal damage from exposure to hypothermia per minute that you are within very cold water. So that's also something that's terrible. Drowning. Drowning is an extension of both being in the water and suffocation. It functions much the same way as suffocation, that you can once again hold your breath for 2 rounds times your Constitution score, and if I'm making standard or full round actions, it starts to reduce my time. Every round that I make a standard or full round, it reduces it by 1. Also, at the end of my time, I have to start making Constitution checks, starting with DC 10 and plus 1 per every previous check, or I start to drown. When I start to drown, I go to 0, I'm unconscious, Then I hit -1 the next round and start dying. Just drown the next round. There are some exceptions to this that make it unique in comparison to suffocation. If I'm unconscious and fall into water, or while I'm underwater I go unconscious, I immediately start making those constitution checks. That means I have no chance of holding my breath. That means I'm like out cold, someone dumps me in the water, or I'm fighting underwater, I go out cold. In this case, as soon as I fail, I go to -1. Or if I was unconscious from damage and was already at negatives, I take another damage and go to 1 less negative than I already was. Second round, I drown. So you can see if you're unconscious in the water, not from drowning, you're in bad shape. You go a lot quicker. Now it's also important to note, you can drown in stuff other than water. Sand, wheat, whatever. If it's some kind of substance that prevents you from actually breathing and you kind of are floating within it, quicksand, that's another good one that we talked about, it'll make you drown. So you can see there's lots of opportunities for you to drown in stuff. Talked about drowning in acid and lava earlier too. So that's it for today. I introduced you to the last 3 hazards I want to talk about. Suffocation. Being in a situation where you just can't breathe, where you don't have air. It may be very quick suffocation, where you're in a confined area, you have no air. Or it could be in like a box you're sealed in, where you're slowly suffocating, kind of torturously almost. I also then talked about the hazards of water, where you can be swept away, or if you're really deep underwater, the pressure will crush you. Even cold water just brings the life out of you. Then I talked about drowning, which is incredibly similar to suffocation, except with the interesting little note here that if you begin to drown while unconscious, well, it drives you to your death much quicker than it would have if you were, let's say, conscious and began to and get to that drowning level. Yeah, yep. You just go straight into worrying about death then. Pretty deadly. But in the next episode, I'm going to talk about NPCs, creating and using them, and then move on to magic items. See if I get to that one in the next episode. Hope I can. But regardless, if you have any questions, comments, anything you want to say, anything you think I left out, please leave in the comments below. Please like, share, and subscribe. It shows you prove the channel, the empire, the work I do. If you want to show some extra support, you can go check out my Patreon. Link in the description below. But until the next time, I bid you farewell.